most threatening thing for Israel. Now, at the same time, the Palestinians aren't there yet. At least the Palestinian leadership. Because for the Palestinians to shift to a one-state struggle means giving up themselves, their own aspirations for self-determination. I mean, now they're locked into a state with Israel. Israel is... The Israeli society, economy, institutions are stronger than those of the Palestinians. There's a danger that they could become an underclass in that one state. I mean, Naeem talked yesterday about the reason why we need a Palestinian state, even though it could evolve into one state, is that we need to get some kind of parity, especially economic parity, before we rush into a one state. They're not opposed in principle, I think, the Palestinians to one state, but the idea is we can't rush into that now. The question is, if they're not going to get a viable state that's going to allow them to address the issue of refugees, economic development, and so on, then maybe we have to rush into the one-state solution. The problem is that we're caught today between two impossibilities. What's more impossible? To end the occupation or to dismantle Israel as a Jewish state and to get to a one-state solution. And I think one thing holding the Palestinians back is this idea that maybe it's an impossibility. So we're in this situation where it's hard to advocate. Just one more thought, okay, and then I'll finish. There's another solution, a third solution that I think is the most workable. I've written about it. If the latest issue of the Link magazine, I've published by the Americans for Middle East Understanding, is devoted to this article. I think the most workable solution, but it's technical, and so it's not something that's dramatic enough that you can mobilize people around, is the idea of a regional confederation. Something like a Middle East Union, like the European Union is a very good model because it balances the integrity of each member state with, nevertheless, a region. People can live and work in an entire region. So that, I'm advocating for what I call a two-stage solution. And that is this. The problem the Palestinians face is that they really have this little state of theirs. It's not that they're holding out on principle to go back to 67. They really have responsibilities in their little country. They've got to address the refugee issue, in which certain numbers of refugees actually come back. They have to address the needs of future generations. So they have to provide jobs, they have to have an economy and so on. They really have a huge national agenda for a little tiny country. So that today, with a two-state solution, the Palestinians can't afford to compromise territorially. They can't accept this and try to go on and build their country. But if economic development and the refugee issue was spread throughout the region, so it wouldn't all fall on the little state, then you might be able to find a little more flexibility. So for example, if you said to the Palestinians, look, compromise on the territory part. I don't think you'd have to compromise this much, but compromise on the territorial. You can accept a smaller state if the international community promises in blood that within, let's say, 5 years, a regional confederation will emerge. That Israel, Palestine, Jordan, maybe by that time Syria and Lebanon would emerge as a regional confederation. Then the little Palestinian state could give you a political identity. You'd have your parliament, you'd have your flag, you have your self-determination. You're in the UN, you're in the Olympics, and so on. But Palestinians living in the region could then get Palestinian citizenship. So if I'm a refugee living in Lebanon, and I really want to come home, if not to my Palestinian state, to Haifa, I can come back. The problem for Israel is not, I think, refugees coming back. The problem is refugees coming back that want citizenship. And that's what threatens what's called the Jewish character of the state. I won't get into that because that's changing as well, but that's another issue. But I think that if refugees came back as Palestinian citizens, voting in a Palestinian parliament, but having all the rights, just like in the European Union. If somebody from Greece goes to live in Germany, they never become German. But they can live in Greece and their rights, and they can live in Germany, and their rights are protected by the European Union. Well, you'd have a Middle East union that would protect the rights of Palestinians living, or for example, the settlers could stay in Palestine. The problem with the Palestinians isn't to have Jews living in Hebron, it's Jews living in a controlling way in Hebron. So if the Jews were living as Israeli citizens in a Palestinian state, in other words, it would create that flexibility that I think, where the Palestinians and every other country could have its national expression in a state, but at the same time you'd have that freedom of movement that would create substantive justice for each individual. That, I think, is a workable solution, but again, it's not something you can go rally people in the streets about. So we're really my conclusion is that we're really in a very difficult situation now in that we're in a transition. I think we're in a transition from the two-state idea to something else. The something else will probably be a one-state anti-apartheid struggle, but we're not there yet. And it makes it very difficult for us to organize and to advocate, but I think that's the reality dictated by what's happening on the ground. Okay. Do you want any questions?
We don't have time for questions. I'm sorry to say that. We'll come in the panel because we do have a time schedule to keep going. But the panel will put your questions down on that. We will go to our workshops now, and then the panel is going to be downstairs where you've been eating. So I think it's reasonable that if you go to the workshops within the next 10 minutes and then try to get downstairs at 3:15, you'll have plenty of time to ask your questions in the workshops and then in the panel.
Can I say one more sentence?
Yes.
I want to say just one more thing, because one sentence. No, that's with a colon. Because I don't want to leave everybody just in the air. I think where we always have to, we still have to advocate to end the occupation. You can't not advocate for that. And we have to bring into the discussion human rights and international law. In that, I think Phyllis is really right. If that's the discussion, then whatever political solution comes out, it'll be within the parameters. It sets a certain floor below which we can't fall. So I really urge all of us to put into our discourse human rights, the Fourth Geneva Convention, international law, because no matter what the actual solution will be, that at least gives us certain guidelines. Okay.
Thank you.